That's what I'm talking about, man. You could spend your whole life getting Babylon to give you $1. While you're not looking, she's reaching around and pulling 2 out of your pocket. Stop negotiating with Babylon. She's a shrewd traitor and you'll never come out ahead. We can't change the world. We've never really made the world better. We can only make pockets better where the kingdom, or at least elements of the kingdom, are elevated or principled. And then, we live under this thing we call the powers. You and I have talked about a lot. The scripture refers to them as like the principalities and powers. Basically, the ruler of this world is a thing called evil. And there's no way that we can conquer evil as a whole. That's Jesus's role. But we can subvert it and build a better system in our context. But I just think that right there is like, hey, guys, city builders, workers, table builders, risk takers, entrepreneurs, we got to talk about this. Like, Jesus wasn't saying that we run from evil. He also wasn't saying that we wage war either in the Babylonian sense, in the empirical sense, like we wage war. He was saying that there's a third way. And I do think that's like, if somebody said, what is the ultimate win of this conversation? I would say it's the third. What is the third way that he taught us?
Yeah.
And man, like sometimes it's fun, and I feel like we don't do this enough. And you and I have done this quite a bit in our relationship. It's so enjoyable to kind of, so anybody who's listened to me more than twice knows that I love basketball. I love the game of basketball. It's probably what I right now commit most of my time to, because 2 of my sons are heavy into travel basketball and we watch basketball. And some of my closest relationships are with dudes who we can just sit and marvel over stories of basketball, like Kobe's 81, or when LeBron scored the last 28 points on the Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals, I think in like his 5th year, or up and coming players like Ja Morant and what he's doing with his athleticism, like this wonder, this awe. It's so fun. There's no contention. We're not debating over who's better. That's always a silly conversation that can be fun when had in the right context, but more just the awe of it. And what the parallel I'm drawing is like, do people do this enough? Not in a sense of you should do it more, but how fun it is to really wonder, WONDER, like create a sense of awe in the conversation over Jesus and like what he taught and the things he said. And I mean, so many other things. Just this morning, Hugh and I, who couldn't make it on this combo, were marveling over Jesus's teaching of the drink and the food and the drink and the table, and how memory tied to those 3 items, there is clear data out there. A guy named Anthony Bourdain, who traveled the world to find great food and great drink, talks about this a bit. So we'll save this for another conversation. But there is pretty provable empirical data out there that can show that food, drink, and table can solidify memory that leads to action in our brains, like indelible, making memories indelible that then lead to action. How wild is that thought just when thinking about Jesus teaching, as often as you eat and you drink at this table, remember me? You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's wild, bro, that he understood to teach us, when you remember me, do it in this setting. Or I'll say it like this, remember me all the time. But when you're in this setting, remember me, because it's going to do something like an endorphin release. We actually talked about alcohol and how wine specifically plays a role in this. It's a crazy, fun conversation, scientific conversation of the human brain and communion and drinking food. And I just think he's so awesome, man. Like, not just that he died for our sins and all that. That's, of course, the greatest, but like, he was brilliant.
Brilliant. Absolutely. Yeah, I constantly get irritated with stories of Jesus because of the way that he can respond. You know, should we pay these taxes or not? Well, let me see a coin. Whose image is that? Caesar's. Well, give him what has his image on it. Whose image is on you? Like his ability to not be pinned in a corner and to respond is like, this dude has 160, 170 IQ. This isn't fair. Like, it's just not fair. I read these stories and I'm like, how do you learn to respond this way? It just feels so
well,
and this isn't to be like, well, right, he's the father's son. No, I'm saying like he's just so smart.
So smart. Yeah. And that's another conversation, man. I think it's a cop-out when we say, oh, he was the son of God, that's why he was so smart. Well, then that's not wonderful.
Well, it's God. It's like, okay,
I don't stand in awe of that, you know?
Right.
And this is a deeper theological, rabbit hole. But Philippians 2 says, he didn't use his deity for his advantage.
Right.
The scripture says he learned from both God and man. He grew in wisdom before both God and man. So it's just wonderful. It's so awesome how he learned how to respond. I was just having a conversation with a group of leaders from Texas recently who were like, how do we respond in this potent Pharisaical atmosphere? And I said, well, number one, you got to sharpen your mind, because Jesus was so sharp. And he never taught us the things he taught us so that we could recite a proof text. Right. That's nonsense. He taught us the things he taught us so that we could recognize that he knew his culture and his context so well. He understood that a slap on the right side of the face was a bitch slap. It was a backhand. And that signified, I'm over you. So to turn the other cheek is saying, nah, dude, hit me with your fist, which indicated equality. Yeah. You don't hit someone with your fist that's a subordinate. That would be like me punching my dog in the face. It's not only inhumane, obviously, because it's my dog, but it also, if someone saw that, they would think, dude, what's wrong with this guy? He's out of his mind. He's fist fighting a dog. But Roman soldiers thought that Jews were dogs.
Yep.
So that's why they backhanded him, to let them know, I think you're a dog. So when you turn your cheek, you're saying, look, if you're going to hit me, I'm not afraid of you. Hit me like a man. I'm not afraid of death. I'm not afraid of the pain that you will incite on me. Unbelievable. Like, I didn't even know he's just the He's
Yeah, I
the
mean,
origin of nonviolent protest. He's the origin of holy subversion. Yeah.
it's funny, like Walter Wink did like quite a bit of work on that exact kind of
Yep.
like dynamic. And I mean, it was just, it's so revealing. And he did it's such a gift because we misunderstand this so much. Like you reference like, oh, like go the extra mile or whatever, right? Where it's like, what, just for those listening, right? Context is a soldier could demand that you carry their bag a mile. And this is like people would set out
Legally.
mile markers on the road at either side of their house. So when they got, like, legally, they had to carry their bags. And so when they got to a mile down the road, they would throw that bag on the ground, having fulfilled legal duty, come home full of bitterness and rage, kick their dog, yell at their wife, and go drink or whatever, right? And then as opposed to, you get to that mile and they say, okay, you can give me my bag back. And they go, nice, cool. Let's keep going. And then you keep going that extra mile, because what it does is it inverts this. Now you have a Roman soldier going, I can get in trouble for you carrying it. It looks like I made you go further than what is legally allowable. So give me my bag back before I get in trouble. And now you have a soldier begging you for their bag back, basically. It's just this unbelievable, like, moral jujitsu move that takes the momentum of the oppressor, just like the being punched as an equal, or stripping down naked when someone takes your jacket. Go, you know what? Here, take my underwear too, dog. It's cool. Like, just take it off.
Right. Which shames the person.
Shaming, humiliation, because I can roll with the sin of another to kind of reposition and highlight the dynamic here. And like you said, that is like the origin of what would become like nonviolent resistance. This is where we get the Gandhis and the Martin Kings, and it's like this is that logic applied, right?
And one more point to that. All right. So let's say, for the sake of argument, let's say you're in such a corrupt scenario where the Roman soldier receives no punishment for the extra mile.
Yep.
Even though what you said is true. That was not Roman law. Let's say you're in such a perverse environment that me stripping down naked does not shame the person. They just laugh at it. They're so wicked. It's still, this is, I think, a sub point of Jesus's brilliance in this teaching. It still puts the power back into my hands. The reason the man goes home that night bitter, kicks his dog, yells at his wife, and drinks is because he was so dehumanized that day. So what Jesus is teaching is humanity too, like it's subversion, but then humanity. Like, you go ahead and carry the bag the extra mile, not because you're being this loving whatever. Like, yeah, sure, of course, that's part of the story of the kingdom and the virtue of the kingdom. But it's more that if you stop at that mile, you were just used like a dog.
Mm-hmm.
If you go one more, you're going as a human. If you reluctantly hand them your cloak, like, I just think of a simple circumstance like being robbed, not like a violent, but I'm just, somebody comes up to me and I'm being robbed and there's nothing I can do. If I give them my wallet, I know mentally what happens on some level, because I've had this experience before. I feel violated. I feel less than human. Like you said, this bitterness grows up. But think about this, like, try to manifest this, or at least visualize or conceptualize this experience. I give them my wallet because I see the desperation and the fear and the insecurity and whatever else. And I say, hey, dog, let me give you, I have some more cash in my center console. Let me give you that too. Good luck. Like, whatever you're going through, good luck with everything. Bro, I just got my humanity back.
Yep.
That's crazy. That's like psychology doctorate level of how to rehumanize yourself in the midst of dehumanization, which is more than just like, that's Martin King to the core. It's more than just nonviolent resistance.
That's right.
It's, we cannot succeed and excel as a people if we continue to think of ourselves as mules and animals and subhuman.
Now, you had brought up earlier kind of this, you know, we use this kingdom, let's say Zion, kingdom. I know Zionism is used really weird, but in the way you're using Babylon, Zion is your antithesis, right? So you have this Babylonian versus kingdom kind of like lens on the engagement in the world, and we look at like the Babylonian or the empire. So in the context of this situation, we go, well, Rome, you know, it is the empire. Rome is Babylon in this like symbolic sense, right? And so then, you know, you were talking earlier and about like saying, look, we don't negotiate with Babylon, or we don't transform Babylon. You want to just like what do you, why are you saying that?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Let's see if we can, let me just start with kind of the text that I've been thinking about, or the teaching.
Okay.
I don't know where it is off the top, so I can't reference it, but I'm guessing it's around Luke 14 when Jesus talks about a strong man, I think he's using metaphor, but he talks about a demon possession, which I think more times than not was metaphor. Even when it actually was a demon possession, I think he was still using it as a story or an allegory to show something bigger. So he talks about demon possession, and he says, if you cast this out, like if you, let's say, let me draw the parallels while I'm saying it. If you cast this out, so if you subverse or non-violently resist the evil and cast it out, and then he says something like, but you only leave the house swept, clean, and well kept, something like that, 7 more will return stronger than the first one. And then he says, to me, the most interesting part of this teaching, he says, so it is with this current generation.
Yep.
Did you happen to like look it up while I was saying that?
Yeah, it's a little earlier in Luke, because it's funny. That's what we're reading through in my house church.
Okay.
We're in 14 now, and we read that a few weeks ago. So let's see. It's probably like 10 or something. Hold on. I'll find it right now. One sec. 12.
Okay.
So I could tell you here. I just pull it up real quick. I don't know what version this is.
Yeah, just read the teaching.
And then he says, I return to the house from which I came. And when he comes, he finds empty, swept, and put in order. And then he goes and takes with him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter and dwell there. And the last state of the man is worse than the first. So shall it be. So shall it also be with this wicked generation.
Yeah. So like, let's say the evil one is hate and division and oppression, you know? And so we fight to cast that out. I mean, I think we could actually draw some really astute parallels of our current moment. Is polarization better? Are we more divided now than we were 10 years ago? I think so. From my perspective, we are, because I was fighting this fight 10 years ago. for hate and oppression and division to be cast out, and for us to come together, not just as the church, but as a people. But let's just say the church. I would say in my adult life, things seem more divided and hateful and polarized than they ever have currently. But then overall, like, this generation can also be an idea of this culture. So what I'm saying is, I don't think that we can negotiate with Babylon. I don't think we can go to her and say, we're going to use our common tactics apart from the way of the kingdom, and we're going to make things better here. One really, I don't know, kind of debatable example, but I think is a very good illustration of what I'm talking about. I'm sitting in the city, Alton, Illinois, where the 13th Amendment was written. If I walk out of the doors of my office, I can walk less than a mile and be at Lyman Trumbull's house, Senator Lyman Trumbull, where the 13th Amendment was written. Of course, it was then, edited and perfected in government settings, but it was written here. This was the amendment to abolish slavery. Alton is a very historic city when it comes to the abolitionist movement. Elijah P. Lovejoy is from here. The abolitionist papers were written here. The Underground Railroad came through Alton into a free state of Illinois. The 13th Amendment was written here. This amendment, it reminds me, or it brings me to the idea of us negotiating with Babylon, because there's a little amendment in the amendment. If you know it well, I'll just even ask you, I'll quiz you. It says we cannot enslave, people as our personal property, but then it makes one small amendment at the
Unless
end.
they're criminals.
Know what it is? Unless they're criminals. And currently today in 2022, we have more African-American men as property of the state than we did in 1822. That's an example of what I mean by negotiating with Babylon. Now, there are criminals, or at the very least considered criminals. We don't have to get into the history of criminalization and, 3 strikes you're out and felonies and on and on.
I would say, suffice it to say, apart from the question of race, like just here in Florida, we have a large homeless population. And I'll just say, like, we want to criminalize a population because we don't want them around here, usually related to something like poverty. We criminalize all the behaviors associated with a group. So the Constitution, and I actually have quotes from city council here locally to say, look, I can't just make this group of people illegal. My hands are tied, AKA by the Constitution. But what we can do, it is illegal in Tampa, Florida, to fall asleep in a public park. Now, you come take a nap and you'll be fine. But you look disheveled and poor and have 2 backpacks, you're getting ticketed or arrested. It is illegal to ask for, it is illegal to panhandle. It is illegal. So we just make all of these behaviors illegal and then that is a way that we then can criminalize an entire population that we want to cage, that we want to move along, that we want to
see. This is another great example. That's what I'm talking about, man. You could spend your whole life getting Babylon to give you $1. While you're not looking, she's reaching around and pulling 2 out of your pocket. You don't understand what you're doing. And why is this conversation important? I think one of the reasons it's important is because when I first started really considering the work of resisting evil, I thought of you, and I thought I could name names, but I thought of 3 particular people in the country that I look to as these are the ones who are resisting evil more than anyone that I know. So,
Why?
Humble yourself, but you were
Well,
one of
that's
three.
great. You may be wrong, but why?
No, no, no. For me, I'm not saying you are. I'm
No, no, no,
saying
sure. But I'm just saying, like, what, like, why did you think that? Or like,
yeah, nothing profound because of the actions of your daily life, because of
yeah, yeah,
what you commit your hand to the plow, what you commit yourself to every day. Like I'm looking at, evil is most potent and pungent when it's enforced upon the poor and the outcast, because it's a convenient class of people to uh, you know put your foot on their neck. And so whether it be men and women, brothers and sisters on the streets, whether it be minority uh, um, men and women, or whether it be the fatherless, because those are the three examples and the three people that come to my mind. Those who work with those groups, it's a daily action for you guys. So my bigger point is, do we want to legislate and negotiate and spend so much of our time and energy to get a law passed that uh, does uh, restricts government from imprisoning men or women for simply being poor and homeless, when then in turn they adjust the law and they amend the law just so that it's now even worse for them. Now, if they're found sleeping, asking for money, like to prove someone is homeless could be fairly difficult. So to just say homeless people are going to jail, that's a terrible law. But
and it can't be done, right? So that's actually officially, you can't do that. There's like, that's a protection, like civil right, basic civil rights.
right.
But no, okay. So let me ask you something, because I
And
get,
anyway, just to land that plane so it doesn't sound like I was all over the place, I'm saying we can cast that demon out. But what Jesus is saying is, if you don't replace it with the kingdom, if you just sweep it clean and leave it well kept, I promise you, 7 more stronger than itself, or 7, he will bring back 7 more with it that's stronger than itself. And this has fleshed itself out in so many circumstances and in so many environments that we have fought to end evil and oppression without building the kingdom city. That's my contention, is that we cannot change Babylon, but we can build the holy city, New Jerusalem, or what you called Zion, or what Jesus said in the prayer, let heaven be on earth as it is in heaven. Or what did he say? Let your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. We can build that or uncover that in our city, right?
yeah.
Which clearly makes our cities better, but not in the way that I was saying. So now go from there.
Well, no, I think this is really helpful. And I wanted to, so one, just my own experience, right? Here in Tampa, we, over the years, like even what you're referring to, as you thought, like, work when we had the daytime drop-in center in Tampa Heights, and the neighborhood was, we were in constant contact and battle with the powers, like
Right.
not just like in any theoretical sense, like city council every Thursday.
Hey, will you explain the powers while you're saying this?
Um,
Just real briefly, like what are the powers?
well, okay, so in scripture,
Are they like spirits flying around in the dark trying to get us? What are the principalities and powers of the air?
yeah, so there is principalities and powers throughout scripture, is a phrase that is a translation of like archai kai exousia, and it's used like throughout the New Testament, actually quite often. And there are places like in Romans, it says our battle's not against flesh and blood, but of principalities and powers in high places, right? So there are times where it seems to be pretty spiritual or ethereal language, but then there's many times that it's used and it means city hall. When they drag you before the archaikai exousia, do not worry about what you will say, for you will be given the words. That is principalities and powers, but we'll say like the authorities, they'll translate there or whatever. But it does overlap. And if you look at the preponderance of uses, you might say there is a spiritual reality here, but that spiritual reality looks a lot like City Hall, actually, looks a lot like the governing agencies, or the as Walter Wink kind of fleshes this out in his trilogy on the powers, like the persona of the institution that possesses the incumbents that sit in the chair. And that actually is in some way what it seems like if you took like, whereas like our sociological analysis may use different language, it seems that the ancients had a very good way of articulating those same dynamics with a spiritual language that recognized kind of a parallel between on earth as it is in heaven. So when you have a warring in the heavens, it maps to a warring on the earth. And there's a bunch of places you could look. I think the quickest two ways to rattle that off, like real brief, and then people could just research. But the story of Daniel fasting, and there's this archangel comes to him and said, what is the Daniel fast? Like 21 days it takes for the angel to come. He says, I've been fasting and praying, and this angel shows up, and he's like, God sent me the second you bowed your head to pray, but I was held up by the prince of Persia. So there's a political dynamic that keeps this archangel spiritual being that was sent by God to get to Daniel. And then he says, and then now I have to go deal and contend with, I think, someone in Greece. And there's no one who fights with me. It's I forget which one's which, but it's Michael and Gabriel, basically. Like, we have to go deal with this problem in Greece. And so there's this very clear like reality of like socio-political realities. They're holding up the move of the spirit of the message or messenger of God, which is something really powerful. And then in the other one, real quick, in Revelation, you have 7 letters to the churches. And those 7 letters are actually written to the angel of the church at Philadelphia, the angel of the church at this place. And so he says, like, whether it's a church or an institution or a country or a family, every group of people, every community has a persona, an angel, a spirit of the thing. And this is very similar to what this maps to what the language of scripture is using when it says principalities and powers. Now, when I just said we were in constant contact with the powers, I explicitly meant City Hall, the police, and code enforcement. So there was a kind of a warring in the spirit, in the spiritual. It was a spiritual war, but it was taking place just between the gentrifying new neighbors with money and wealth and the mayor's ear, moving into a historically poor black and brown community. But once it turned historic, they start gentrifying, and we run a drop-in center in that area. So I started dealing with that. Now, what I wanted to get to with my story is I was at city council every Thursday arguing with them. I was on YouTube. I've actually just lost this channel documenting all of these news stories and things that were going on. I was so pissed. All this history just vanished on this old YouTube channel. So boo for centralization. That's just anyway. So I lost that, but I was fighting there. We had cops.
Like it was canceled.
Yeah, let's not get off on that. It just, all right. I lost it, partly on me, whatever, it's gone. And it's tragic. It's all gone. So the police, code enforcement, taking pictures, they're like raining on us because basically there's been this mandate from the mayor, which is the executive office, which has command over code enforcement and the police. Now, that's different than city council, which is the legislative, but they're saying, get rid of these guys. Like, we need to clean up this neighborhood. We don't want these poor people here. They're enforcing all of these laws. They're trying to build a case that our recycle bin kind of bike co-op is a chop shop for bikes, which it may at times have been that, but generally it was not. And they're trying to run us out of the neighborhood, right? Okay, so I was in constant fighting and what you might call negotiating with these powers, saying, back off. These are human beings. These are neighbors. That's what I would call it. Association meetings. And I will tell you, literally, in neighborhood association, I could name their names, all the people, neighbors of our place, the kind of the newer, wealthier, whiter neighbors that had moved into the neighborhood, have this neighborhood association. And they're the ones like pitchforks and torches against all these, crazy people, homeless people, drug addicts, prostitutes. They want us all out of here. Right? Me,
people like you.
Well, I became the caricature face, like public enemy number 1, because I'm the one showing up at all the meetings. speaking on their behalf, right? So I'm like representative poor person or whatever. Well, so I could go to, like, let's say I went and grabbed a drink with any one of these people. They're great people. They're good men and women.
Totally.
But when they got together in a collective for this purpose,
Wow.
the like logic
Wow.
of the mechanism was like I was watching demon possession.
Isn't that
Like they
wild?
spoke with a different voice. People talk about like familiar spirits. I could tell you exactly what they would say and what tone they would say, how it would sound. It is going to be filled with division and hate and bitterness and blame and entitlement and lack of empathy and like you name it. This like this thing that would take them over, and I would be dealing with that. Okay, so now fast forward, because we lost that, right? We end up getting run out of the neighborhood. So we said, well, let's pivot. So that's when we launched Well Built Bikes and we launched our mobile grocery distribution. So we changed a lot of the work that we do. And it's changed us tremendously. But now what's interesting is, and some of what I'm saying this to kind of emphasize something I think I hear you saying, is like it was actually we've done a better job now going, I'm not actually doing a lot of that fighting anymore. Because one, I was definitely going to just end up in jail, bleeding, hurting other people. And what ended up happening was now I had enemies in both directions because now I would come back from those meetings and I'm like, they made some good points. So I would go to my friends in the alley and be like, stop shitting on people's porches. Stop setting fires on the corner of main intersections. Like, stop crazy. Stop putting, you know what I mean? And then now they're like, what, you're against us? I'm like, no, bro, I'm for you. And then now I'm like stuck in the middle of this, like trying to go back and forth. And I was going, there's crazy people on every side of me. So I was like, you know what? Let's do something different. Let's set a different kind of table where it's easier for people, where they can gather and they can come together and we can bring people from these different demographics like we were going to the bar to have a drink. Because that dude's a great dude and that dude's a great dude. And we were setting the wrong circumstances for them to come together and collide. And they hated each other. Now, that's a slower, longer process, but I'm still engaged in that. And I think in that way, it feels like building a different world in the pocket of this city, building a different kind of culture and city in the presence of our enemies or in the presence of Babylon. But I also want to say, just so there's that. That's the whole thought. But back to what you were saying about like passing laws to restrict the government. I also do want to say, like, I will continue to be an advocate for those that are fighting within the systems to create protections because of things like the Civil Rights Act. So there are things now you go, well, maybe these other things, like there's unintended consequences and things happen, but there are times where just binding the strong man, even for a moment, is actually a way to build. So like if you
totally. No, I'm with that. I'm with
by the
that.
way, let me throw in one more piece of this because Jesus said something that I think about all the time. He only says the word ecclesia twice, and both times he says it, it's kind of like to Peter, on this rock I'll build my church, and then he always says right next to ecclesia is what you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. So there's this parallelism, like just what we were talking about with the powers, right? What you bound on earth will be bound in heaven, and what you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Like this, there's this thing that's taking place. But he says, and the gates of hell will not prevail against my church and my ecclesia. And so I go, okay, my people, my crew, like are gonna. And what I hear is hell is a gated community, and we are gonna kick those gates in. And so I do think there is an advancing into that place, and those gates won't hold us out. Those gates won't keep in who are captive or keep out who are coming. And so there's a bit of a thing there where I go, no, we do want to advance against darkness, against Babylon, and we do want to take every tactic we can. Now, I'm no longer at a bunch of city hall meetings, but I give a bunch of attaboys to my friends that are, because I'm going to be over here doing this thing, and when they create an opening, I'm going to flank. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm still in that kind of game, but trying to create these pockets of, like you said, resistance to that.
Me,
go ahead.
To me, that's clearly part of holy resistance. So I wrote this. I'm going to just read straight from it, and then let's talk about it for a second. All right. So just to prep it, almost every reference to love of the world, not like for God so loved the world, but when there's a juxtaposition put before us about love of the world and love of God, he's talking about a system. He's talking about what you were referring to as the powers.
Yep.
So this idea of the world is the world system, and
World system.
it's the ways of Babylon. It's Revelation 18 when he says, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. Come out of her, lest you take part in her sins." All he's saying is, you can't abide in me if you're abiding in her. All right, so that's kind of the preface to this. This is what I wrote. If the world system is a train that is only growing in technology, power, and size as it moves forward, and all the communities, oppressed peoples, and hopeless stories of the world are the train cars being pulled behind it, and what I'm saying is the efforts to change or simply better systemic sin in the world is similar to trying to build walls to stop the train, which are futile and will never work. The way of Jesus is to build small switch tracks so that the train cars can have a way off the unstoppable path that the train is on. These are kingdom ecosystems. These are brave cities. So let's talk about that first. Like, I want to know what you think about the illustration, but also let me see if we can bring the two together.
Yep.
If we are engineers, and this funny in this context, not train engineers, like building engineers, structural engineers, or we're building train tracks or whatever, and we're dealing with this unstoppable train. Interesting illustration. There is a movie called Unstoppable starring Denzel Washington that it's this runaway train, and he's on it and they can't stop it, and it has all these engineers trying to figure out how to stop it, right? So let's take that idea, like we're part of this team. We're trying to, well, the reality is I believe you cannot stop this train. The one who is driving this train is the power that has been given authority over the train. So it's actually not to be stopped. It is doing what it was meant to do. Eventually, the authority that's been given power over this train will be thrown into a lake of fire or something, right? It'll end, and a new train will be built. That's not the world we live in right now. We live in a world where this unstoppable train is crushing through every wall. But as we're trying to engineer switch tracks, I think it is strategic for us to be in the city hall meetings, understanding how and why they're doing what they're doing. And I think it is never, so this is a crude illustration, but or idea that popped in my mind, but they used to sacrifice babies to this god Molech, according to history and according to the Bible. I imagine walking up to that moment, seeing like little kids being killed and offered to this god, and me going, well, I can't stop that, so I'm going to go start some orphanages or something like that. Nah, dude, I'm running up there screaming, saying, give me the kid. Like, I'm not saying by any means that in this moment of unthinkable or even normal injustice that we're not fighting it. Ever, ever, ever. I'm saying the train ain't stopping. So we have to think beyond, if the little kid is standing on the track and we run and grab him, we saved that kid. But we have to build switch tracks because all the oppression that's being pulled by the train, like we were talking about this in the context of our restaurant that we started. We can run a restaurant that seemingly but looks like it would belong in a kingdom city. Like, people operate how it would, and there's flaws, but people operate how it would if it was in a kingdom city. To me, that's a switch track to a train. to a train car that was being pulled by this unstoppable engine that we were able to divert off into a new story. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Mm.
So that's probably, I probably said too much. I should have just read it and stopped, but yeah.
Interesting.
Thoughts?
No, I mean the analogy is interesting because of the idea of the momentum and the power. So a couple things. One,
because it grows. That's what I'm saying. It grows. If you look back, I don't think anyone could suggest that we're not more evil than we used to be. We're just better at it. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people want to argue about that, but like it
Right.
does. I mean, I get what you're saying.
But none of the data lines up. Like, we kill more people, we enslave more people, we have more technology of this, like more families are being, you know what I'm saying? Like, just with the push of a button from a boardroom, we can bomb an entire village if we want to.
Yep.
What I'm saying is we not only are more evil, but have far more capability of evil than we did 2,000 years ago.
Well, that's a happy thought, man. What do we I mean, no, because like, you know, I think of like, because so like I have a different image in my head. It isn't to contrast what you're saying, but I always think about like the kingdom kind of
I might
like
be wrong.
space as flash mob a little bit. Like I always use the language of rehearsal. Like we're rehearsing the reality that we dream of, pretending that it's real here and now today, living that future reality here in kind of a hope as defiance in the face of something that, you know, it stands out in the face of. It's like, you know, how do you maintain hope in the face of despair? As a protest, as an active flash mob, pretending that this other thing is real, like pretending in the sense of like tending to it before it comes, right? So we're rehearsing this future reality here and now, and we're inviting people to join the dance, let's say, the flash mob. Now, but your image, and it isn't to contrast that, it's just a different one I've had in my mind. The one of like momentum. So when you started using the train analogy, what I thought of was, and I won't get this exactly right, but Dietrich Bonhoeffer said something like, it is not, and of course, this is in the context, for context, those that don't know, this is in the context of the Holocaust. You know, he says, it is not just the job of Christians to bind the wounds of those that are being crushed by the wheels of oppression, but to jam a spike into the wheels themselves. And I couldn't help but think of your train analogy. Like, you can't stop this train. And then the switch tracks. So I'm just curious, like, obviously it might break down, but I'm just curious to hear your thought on my own image, and then that image as well, just like playing with these ideas or analogies.
All right. So you just blew my mind in a good way. And I want to get back to what you said at the beginning, because I absolutely agree. Oh, okay. So all you just said was Matthew 28, go and make disciples. It was awesome. Like, immediately I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, because go and make disciples, what Jesus is saying is go and teach them all the things that I taught you. What did he teach us?
To obey all. Teach them to act like I told you to act.
Yeah, and how did he teach us to act? He taught us to act like we're in the kingdom.
Let's go. Walk with me. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So making disciples is the flash mob. It's going and building kingdom cities. So this is a part that I think is very clear, but could sound contradictory or even a bit confusing to some. I'm not even saying that the world is not better now than it was 50, 100, 150, or 10,000 years ago. I'm saying the only way to make the world better is to build more kingdom cities.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is completely provable that we are more evil now than we were at the time of the Holocaust. So let just for an example, and this is a debatable thing, but I'm just going to use it. Let's, for the sake of argument, let's consider that we all agreed that killing a fetus in the womb, that killing a baby in the womb was evil, was wrong. That, of course, there's nuance, and of course, there's scenarios where we could go, what about this? That's not what I'm saying. I'm sure there's scenarios where we could go, where we could argue that killing a human being is necessary. That's not my point in this moment. Let's just say that we all agree that baby or that developing life, that child in the womb, that ending its life, its innocent life, is wrong.
Okay.
Well, and maybe this is an obvious example, but it happens so much, specifically in poor and even more so in Black and brown neighborhoods. It happens so often, and we almost do not bat an eye over it. So then compare that, apart from the debate of the scenario, compare that to the Holocaust, only meaning the atrocities and the atrocities. Like, we will always grow in our ability to commit heinous acts and then to do them in a way where we don't even think about them. So another example would be, the Dark Ages, or even the medieval times of waging war on another village and having to round up and train an army and go in and kill women and children and do this thing. Whereas now we know that in multiple places in the world, a man in a three-piece suit can make a decision in a room to go and send a machine without a man, just a drone, bomb villages with innocent women and children, and nobody bats an eye. We just go to sleep at night. My point in telling those two examples is not to give a bleak feeling or experience or emotion of our future or our current state. It's to say we have to beg God for the wisdom and the creativity of how do we build better cities instead of trying to negotiate with Babylon, because she's too smart. She will always think of better ways to commit atrocities and oppression and evil. We have to think of ways where she's not welcome in our context.
So interesting. What when you began and you said more evil, and as you started talking, the words that came to mind. So when I hear that, I think more evil qualitatively. But what you're describing is really quantitatively, right? Because I'm actually, and by the way, I when you said it and I heard qualitative, I went, I don't think that, probably that's not true, because the condition of the human heart, I don't know that we're much better off, but I don't know that we've actually sanitized evil in many ways to a place where we can and desensitize. Like, you can do it from a three-piece suit, right? But I'm like, the ability to do that, it's become, I don't know that you need to be more evil qualitatively, but then what you laid out in both cases is we've gotten there's more evil quantitatively, as in more slaves, more killing, we've gotten so efficient at this thing, and it's become sanitized and divorced from, we don't need to be savage to be evil, right? I think I was watching Vikings or something, right?
That's exactly what I'm talking about, though.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think we've gotten to the answer yet. Like, what you're saying is part of it. What I'm saying is, talk this out. Think about this with me. okay, we've seen the movies with chattel slavery happening, and we've thought to ourselves, never could I have stood by and allowed this.
Right.
Right, wrong, or indifferent, it doesn't matter. That's not the point. But never could I have stood by and watched this. That's the thought. So my question is, what will the things be in 250 years that our great-grandchildren will say never?
Yep.
I'm saying the train is getting smarter.
Yep. No, I understand. It's less and less clear, and it's less and less obvious, and it does give us the impression that we have some clean hands along the way. Like, well, I'm not doing that. Like, of course I'm against slavery. Never mind that unbeknownst to me, all of my clothes were produced by someone in slave conditions or something like that, right? It's easy for us to say that we stand against injustice because we don't face it in any tangible way. And oh, by the way, like books like Ordinary Men, which are like tales of, from the Holocaust, of like regular old dudes that become Gestapo, and like how does that happen? And like it's we're a little too quick to say.
Yep.
I could not stand by. And you're right to go, well, fast forward a little bit. What are those things that later we won't be able to say? But I do think like back, rather than getting, so to me, like there's a big, like, I don't know, temptation to get off on like what I don't like about what you're saying, like in the more evil thing.
Come on.
It's bait for debate. So everyone has like
that's right.
To that, and they want to like,
I hear you.
Contentious. What I want to say is just like, I don't know, maybe, but we can do better. And guess what? Like, and by the way, we can, like, because what I hear, don't negotiate with Babylon. The way I say that a lot of times is, I don't want to be out here shaking my fist about these systems. We can build better systems. We can so I look at like the school system and I go, man, this is decrepit, but I don't need to waste my time going to the school board and protesting the teachers union, or with the teachers union or against the teachers union, or talking about the nutrition, my plate education, like the education food system or whatever. All of these things, or the fact that all of this was built on like, so we would have soldiers that weren't malnourished.
Bro.
But to go, no, look, just gather a handful of kids, love them to death, build up people with self-esteem and ability to think critically and creative and collaborate, and see if you don't build a better world on the back of a handful of jits doing
it. And this is the reality. What then happens to the school system when you do that?
That's right. Now there are alternatives. And by the way, that's what's happening when you see these people are like, no more charter schools, or no alternative schools, or no private schools, or micro schools. And it's alarming. Because
it's got to change.
As soon as you listen, if I'm on a sinking ship and I see a life raft, guess what? I'm getting on that life raft. It doesn't even have to be like a pretty life raft or the best life raft or like the coolest life raft. It is a way off of a sinking ship, which is what every single teacher in at least the Hillsborough public school system that I know is praying that will come.
Yeah, that's right.
And what I want to know is, where are the people that are building it, and how can we equip them? Because it can't get built quick enough.
And that's a great place to land this conversation, is like, there's so much brilliance and genius in the mind and heart of Jesus in how he taught us to build the kingdom city. It's not exclusive. It's not a sect. It's not sectarian. It doesn't separate or move away and create it's a well, not a fence, right? That illustration is, or that phrase is drawn from how farmers used to keep cattle in. Some would build fences, others would build wells.
Yep.
And the well water, the animals were always drawn back to it, and so they would come back to it. I love what you said, and I'm wrapping this whole conversation up, and then you can finish it. But I love what you said about how did you say it, John? You said I can't remember your phrasing, but You said so many good things, but I want to say that the layers to this of why we don't negotiate with Babylon is not, oh, you said something like this could just create debate, and that's irrelevant. That's not what we're trying to do. Like if
Right, right.
someone was like, well, in
Right. No,
1883,
but
there were
that's
more.
exactly. I'm like, look, I don't know. I'm not a historian. You may or may not be
Right.
right. Here's what I'm going to say. Like, just at some theological level, this is the situation of our heart. I don't know. Does the arc of history head
And
toward justice or injustice? I don't know. But here's what I do know. We need to claw our way toward the kingdom of God and pray that
that's
it
it.
would come here in our city, in our household, on our block with all of our blood, sweat, and tears. And that's it.
And Luke 12 was right. If we just sweep the house and leave it clean, beware of what's coming.
Well, and so to this is what I think that it's like if you just, and this is the old temptation that I had, even like I wanted to see, and I would have said back then when I was fighting with city council all the time, like I've always been a bit of an anarchist, but I was more of one that just wanted to see
Yeah.
that thing crumble before. Like we'll just figure it out later. I don't think that's a good idea anymore. So getting rid of that demon isn't going to be for our benefit in the end, because what's kind of cool. Like I have electricity right now. The lights are on, the water runs. Like there are street lights. There is a school system. It's decrepit as it is. Those kids are getting They eat. They have
Food.
someone
Yep.
watching them during the day. So parents, like
Safety.
God, for the broken systems that we have in place, I do not want to see them crumble yet. What we have to do is we have to build the kingdom. We have to build the alternatives, build the ecosystems wherein which those students can thrive, those neighbors can thrive, those friends can thrive, and come into that place where they can call that a home and find sanctuary. And then what you find is those cities become, those Babylonian structures become vacated like a sinking ship. They become abandoned, and we can reutilize them and reimagine them and reinvigorate this life, this yeast that'll work its way through the hole back into them later as some sort of redemptive process. But the idea that we just can't. So what I hear when I hear about the demon getting swept out, I'm like, yeah, just tear the system down. And I'm like, that's not better. No system is not better than the broken system. Broken system.
Yeah, that's better. Right.
And
yet
at the same time, getting rid of that is important. It's just we got to have a longer view and theory of change on how we build the alternatives.
And I think that everything that we can see with our eyes, like someone asked me in this conversation one time, do you believe in the redemption of systemic evil or something like that? I can't remember. Like, do you believe these spaces can be redeemed? My point has nothing to do with the spaces. Like, I don't believe spaces are sacred or secular. They're spaces. I think that we live under a reign that has been given over to evil. It's called Babylon. Babylon cannot be redeemed. It will be killed. It will be burned up. What I'm saying is, I think the schools can then mimic, and that's what brings change. So you start a school that does these 5 things. The Hillsborough school system watches it, sees the success, sees the thriving of the kids, sees the thriving of the teachers, and then they begin to mimic it. And that's where we can continue to see kind of the wake of the kingdom move throughout our cities and bring change. But it's not that we're changing our cities. It's not that Tampa is now a Christian city. Tampa will always be under the rule of Babylon. But the kingdom city can expand throughout Tampa to where it's impacting in such a way that you say Tampa has changed.
I think both of us maybe struggled with some of the final moves of Walter Wink, probably in the trilogy, where it is like the redemption of the powers, right? But I do want to hold on to some sort of hope for that. But the image in scripture that comes to mind is that there are this circle of thrones before the throne, of the Lamb, and they kneel and they lay down their crowns. Now, when you say like, Babylon will be burned up, it will be killed, and I think in some ultimate way, this is the dragon, the great enemy, the thing that possesses. And I don't know what these thrones are necessarily, but to say that perhaps it is these systems, these lesser systems, parts of the world order, I don't know. But there is this image in scripture, and I do want to hold on to this hope, even though it isn't obvious to me how this works. But that it is like that they kneel before the throne, that they take their crowns and they lay them before the king, and that a system like a city hall, like a school board, I don't know, can actually lay down its power and secede it to the king and to the way of Jesus. And so does that fly in the face of the thing that gets burned up? I don't know, but it is there as a promise in Revelation. It is something that I long
Yeah.
for to be true. And am not willing to like let that go, but it isn't obvious to me.
Yeah. Yep. Good. We don't have Hugh here this week to give us a clever title of this great
Well, and I don't
paper,
remember
but
all the other ones. He's always good at that. But I wrote down a line that you said. It might be too long for a title, but you said making disciples is building kingdom cities.
yeah.
Although we covered some topics, maybe we go back and listen, because also don't negotiate with Babylon might actually be.
Yeah, I think the making disciples is building kingdom cities is actually a longer conversation that we need to have,
Okay.
because it's really clear that I love your example of the flash mob, and it's really clear that he says, teaching them to obey everything that I taught you.
Yeah.
And it's like, bro, how did we get off on this idea that making disciples was like, like meeting once a week and memorizing a verse, or something like that, or like asking accountability questions? It's crazy. It's like, no, he taught us, like the Sermon on the Mount is specifically the eye for an eye teaching that we were talking about. He taught us how to subvert and non-violently resist the ways of Babylon and build a better city. That was his teaching. So yeah, we need to talk about that down the road. But yeah, I think this is like, why do we stop negotiating with Babylon? This might even be part one, because we need to go deeper into this. Of there's still so many layers that we haven't hit on, that if you try to turn this into a formula, I think you're gonna miss it. It's more of a smelling salt to like wake you up to go, okay, what do we do now? And by the way, we don't have the answers. Like we're saying, and the origin of this idea for me was like Christians trying to get Christians into government. It's never once proven to be the answer to making a municipality better over time. It's more of Christians getting in the dirt and building better switch tracks.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, on that, and this again, like you're saying, there's a bunch of conversations, and this does go back a little bit to the Walter Wink stuff, but like, it isn't clear to me that a Christian can sit in seats of power without losing themselves. Like it's gaining the world and losing your soul, because
the very thing,
the seat itself possesses the incumbent. Like you look at like something like the Oval Office. The Oval Office does what the Oval Office does, and the person that sits in that seat, while there may be, they change the like trimmings of like the way that presents, is that, but it's like the Republican Democrat kind of conflict seems like a hydra. Like it's two heads of the same monster. This thing does what it does, and it does it consistently, whether it was Obama or Bush or Clinton or you name it. It's like we go to war. We have prisoners in Guantanamo. We have surveillance state. We just more and more. We taxation. It's just like we do what we do, and we just continue to do it, and we change the face on that incumbent. And it's not clear to me that putting a different person in that chair will change the dynamic of what that chair does. I believe that chair will change what that human being does.
And didn't it seem like Jesus was awfully disinterested in that as well?
For sure.
Yeah, I mean that goes back to your who do you pay taxes
But
to? Like,
it's look, his image is on it, give it to him. God's image is on you, give it to God. And oh, by the way, my kingdom is not of this system.
yeah,
It's not of this system. I have a different kingdom. I'm already
right.
sovereign, baby. Like, don't worry about that. And that
Great.
is a completely other thing, which I feel like we're about to tangent into another whole show. So maybe we can pick back up on that because I got something to do.
All right, man. That was a good combo. I can't wait to get deeper into it soon.